This hot take is one that I've been thinking about for a little while now, considering we know we've achieved a new era of our podcasting where people are actually responding to our takes, right? We spent all this time when we first started off, as everyone does, I guess, not getting many views. Then the views start to sort of roll up and to tick up double digits, triple digits, four digits sometimes even, and we're like, oh wow, we're sort of rolling along. But then no one was really commenting at that point. And then in the last few months now, especially since the playoffs, I guess, came around, we started to get a lot more feedback from those that have clicked on our videos and watched some of our shorts and things like that. Obviously, as we've sort of said off air, a lot of our comments is obviously negative, and, and a lot of it is very defensive. And I guess this is the take that I wanted to maybe, spin with you a little bit, is that I've never really felt that defensive about a player. Maybe I just haven't loved them enough. I just don't know. I just don't know. Okay. Maybe I said to you that, Steve Nash wasn't deserving of two MVPs. I don't know. Like, I don't know. You're gonna jump up in arms here and, go grab your gun out of the closet or, come fly over here and, knock me one. I don't know. But I guess I'm just really actually I'm not saying surprised, but it's just really interesting to observe the level of passion the general population has for certain players and teams. And I don't know, your thoughts why? Because like I said, I've never really felt that way.
I think, speaking from experience, like sports is great to run parallel to your own life and you can become invested and it's almost like a story. There's characters, obviously the players, and there's a narrative that comes along with these things. And, you get very invested in your narrative, because there's 30 teams, so there's 30 potential fan bases creating their own narrative. And I have my narrative base, which is Phoenix, right? So I watch Phoenix and I think about Phoenix and I watch them in relation to other people. So naturally, my narrative puts everyone else down a peg because I don't want them to be successful, their narrative. I want my narrative to be successful. So I think that's one aspect of it. I also think that, there's that it's bias, 100% it's bias. Um, but you're right. Like, I can admit, like, hope versus realism, right? So when we went against Denver last season and we were tied 2-2 and Devin Booker and Kevin Durant are playing out of their mind, there's hope that we can pull it off in game five. But there is not, I'd never definitively say anything about the NBA, right? And we kind of learned that year after year that very rarely is there a definitive team that is going to win. The one team that comes to mind is the super team Golden State Warriors when they had Kevin Durant. And even then, definitively the third championship run where Kevin Durant goes down with the Achilles and Klay Thompson goes down with the ACL, even though that was really definitive for so much of the season, it fell apart right at the end. So that is the beauty of sports, that anything can happen. But I also think that from a long-term game, when we talk about off-season acquisitions or moves, when we talk about where the franchise should be heading or what their focus should be, I do think
I,
sometimes there's a bit of narrative disillusion.
I think with as you start to open this can of worms potentially here, I can feel the part where I obviously go for Orlando and I obviously go for other sports teams in other codes, all right, in that sense. And you do have you choose that team at some point in your life, maybe as a child, or if your best friend goes after that team, or your parents gone after the team, or your brother went after that team, or who knows, okay, why you chose that team. And you sort of build that sort of affinity for that team over all these years. And like you said, you're obviously looking to see them succeed. And by virtue of that, I guess you're saying you're hoping that other 29 teams fail. Okay, I can see that component, but let's take and I guess one of the topics that we've spoken about that I'm sure many people have spoken about is the MJ LeBron debate. Okay, and I guess it's easy one to take specifically on this topic. It's that why do so many people feel the need to go to such lengths to back up their opinion on this player? Like my favorite player was Penny Hardaway, okay? And I would have been like, yeah, I love Penny Hardaway. Someone said something bad about him, I'd probably laugh and say, no way in hell, okay? And that's it, okay? And I'm not sure. Maybe that's in part where since Penny Hardaway, I'm not really sure. I've had many players I've liked, okay? I wouldn't say I've had a player that I've liked more than Penny Hardaway. Okay, and that's probably an interesting sort of aspect for me. And I guess, like I said, why do we feel such an affinity that we need to go out there and say support these athletes that, my God, like, I'd go to war for LeBron over MJ in that sense.
I, I guess to repair it with the narrative thing, I think this is where we put ourselves into the narrative. So, for me, LeBron is my MJ in the sense of I grew up watching him from when I was a kid to a teenager to a young adult. And I don't understand the appeal of Michael Jordan. I can watch retrospective highlights and documentaries and get a really good sense of who that is. And if I'm objective about it, I can appreciate the fact that like I think he has his level of greatness. But I also think that recency bias is a huge thing, and I think in 10, 15 years time we'll be trying to clutch at someone to be better than LeBron, and then people will have forgotten how good LeBron is. And you look back in time and you go, well, Larry Bird and Magic Johnson now really are remnants of a different debate, right? And then you go back further and Kareem just seems to get ignored a lot of the time. Wilt Chamberlain has his own case to make. But there's all these different players along the way that we have now forgotten about. And Michael Jordan is the recent signpost. Kobe's had a big resurgence, post his death. And controversially, joys of the internet here, but perhaps his legacy is a little bit inflated by the untimely death of himself.
Oh, absolutely.
Because he's been snuck into a lot of top 10 or top 5 lists that I don't think people had him at the end of his retirement, but that's not to show disrespect. I don't want that kind of community coming after me here. I just think that, when you talk about players' careers or players in general, there's an objectivity to it. If I had to bring it back to the Steve Nash thing that you just mentioned, Steve Nash was a very heavy narrative MVP, going to a team that had 20 wins to bump them up to 60 wins, increasing the effective field goal percentage of like 8 of his teammates. There was an aspect there that people had to focus on to make sure he could get those MVPs because the raw stats didn't help him.
So
right.
maybe
And I think
if you're
you do
taking
that.
if I was to go back to when Steve Nash in his prime, yeah, you obviously were following Steve Nash when he was in his prime. I know you were a huge fan back then. Do you have his jerseys? Yeah, I presume to, and all that sort of, rah, yeah. All right. If I had said to you back then, Steve Nash in his prime did not deserve his 2 MVPs, yeah, that he robbed, I believe, Shaq of one, yeah, or Kobe of one, maybe was that Shaq or Kobe? Well, I don't know. They were both up there at that point. It was prime Shaq and prime Kobe, in that era as well. And how would you feel about that? Like, would you go, dude, like, no way? Like, would you feel like you need to take up arms here to go and, um, defend him?
Well, I wouldn't be pulling up arms, but I guess I would use that rationale of like, hey, look, here are all the objective slash narrative reasons why he won the MVP and why I think he was deserving of said MVP. I can't deny the fact that his raw stats weren't better than Kobe and Shaq, and obviously his team didn't achieve the level of success that they needed him to. But no, like I wouldn't die on a hill for it, so to speak. But I also think, as a second, to this whole discussion, I think the internet enables this kind of conversation, right? Is that obviously a lot of our feedback, I would say it's probably an 80-20 split. A lot of people think that we're ridiculous and what we're saying is just objectively wrong, which thank you for that. And then there's 20% where like, you know what, I actually can see a point that you're making and I can see why you've made that point and maybe I agree with it or maybe I just understand what it is. And I think this is this is an issue with humans in general, is that we can't separate emotions and objectivity, right? We need to be able to talk about specific people and do things. The Zion debate is a great one because objectively, right, if you had an employee in your business that hadn't worked for 4 years, like he basically called in sick 80% of the time, in the real world, you've fired that person, right? Irrelevant of how good that 20% of production is. But in this NBA landscape, we really fixate on certain things and get very invested in them. And it's easy for us who aren't making decisions with millions and billions of dollars at stake here to say, I would trade Zion. That's the whole premise of what we're doing, is that we give opinions, we give thoughts about things that we would do in their situation. But we're also not ignorant to the fact that if we were the GM of New Orleans and we really did want to trade him, one, there's issues of getting return. Two, there's issues of ownership potentially vetoing the decision. And then three, there is the recognition that from a public perception, the fan base will not be very happy with those decisions. We would understand those aspects. I feel like sometimes people miss our premise of what we're trying to do. or
Well,
just engage with us.
there's two sides to every story, right? That's the reality that we all know. But I think what you're alluding to here is that more often than not, people only look at the side they want to see.
Yeah, or just naturally feel that, it reminds me of one of those like great jokes on the internet where if I told you I really like oranges, and a natural comment that follows from there is, well, how can you not even consider apples? And what about the mango community? And naturally, what happens is that we take a really simple premise, a simple sentence, a simple concept, and then we just add all these different layers onto it. We try to create controversy out of it. Where your magic takes, I think, are ridiculous, right? But here is the issue. Here is the issue. Until your Magic actually start making the playoffs, start winning, etc., you can keep making that take and it might age like fine wine. Because next year, maybe they fall short just again. And then the year after, they fall short. And then all of a sudden, they're caught in a situation where they've got to offer all these guys contracts, but they've
Yep.
got no reason to do that because they've had no success. You are projecting a bad timeline. I'm more optimistic than you, but ultimately, we're both not able to tell what happens in the future. Um, I would be more optimistic in your scenario. And we're both a little bit pessimistic about the Phoenix Suns. We could be hoisting up the championship next year based on what's happened. It's not unfathomable, but I'm also not ignorant enough to say that, oh yeah, it's definitive. Yeah, nothing's going to go wrong in the next 100 games to get to the NBA championship, and no one's going to get injured, and everyone else is going to get injured, and we're going to make even more trades during the middle of the year just to plug those gaps. There is an aspect of like optimism and pessimism and just like perspective. I don't know.
I,
What an
I think
interesting topic you've pitched us
I,
here. I feel
I,
like
I
we're
think
just attacking our fans.
I think that feels like there's two sides of that coin as well. But but I feel like I want to just wrap this up with something that you brought up a few minutes ago. You talked about you didn't firsthand really get to see the Jordan era because obviously you're younger than me. Okay, so and LeBron in your eyes for many, many years was the GOAT. Yeah. And then slowly I understand that you come around to the understanding that, LeBron and MJ, look, it's a great debate, but MJ is probably that level above. Then no, this is a whole nother take. But I'm just gonna now, it's just popped into my head though. Obviously, I was around more so to see the Jordan era. Okay. And it was like I said, and that's something I probably said to you before we even did podcast, yeah, that it was a whole feeling of Jordan's invincibility that just no one could beat him. Yeah, it was that thing, and I guess it's proven with his 6-0 record. All right, it wasn't just a feeling; it's a fact. No one could beat him for those 6 times he got there. He won 6 times. Yeah, but I guess it's interesting that it just popped in my head. Well, who was the GOAT before Jordan? Yeah, in the 80s, before Jordan came on the scene, who was the GOAT before Jordan? And I guess where are all those guys in the woodworks? Like you talked about fruit before, they're probably the mango community that are jumping out and talking about that guy that he was the GOAT before MJ. And I don't know, he should be in this conversation too. I don't know. Bill Russell. I don't know. Who is it? Because I wasn't born either. I don't know if you would
Well, you could
know.
almost make a case and say it's an evolution of sports media or the way that we view it. So I think perhaps, and I'm speaking on behalf of people from 40, 50 years ago, maybe people actually just were present. They were mindful of what they were watching. And they said, wow, the Lakers squad's good this year. Oh, yeah, I really like their chances. And that was it. And now in 2023, in social media society, everything is like, and look, we're guilty of doing this too. Luka Doncic has played 4 seasons, but he's already going to be the GOAT. You know what I mean? And like, oh, Trae Young's got to get out of Atlanta because he's only got 15 more years to potentially win a championship, and it's not going to work otherwise. And oh, LeBron only has 3 more seasons left, and even if he wins 3 more championships, it's not going to count because he's still like had too many losses in the past. We're not present. Maybe that's the big round circle here is that we're just not present. We're not present
I,
in the moment about what we're seeing.
I love your suggestion there, your thoughts on that topic there. I guess I'm even going to say that if the rare fact that we might have, I feel like now I'm being rude because I'm laughing, that we have someone that's actually consuming our media in YouTube and Instagram that's probably in their 50s to 60s, that you should drop us a shout out and come on our show. And I'd love to talk to you about who was your GOAT back then, and obviously before the social media and internet and computer world. And look, I guess it's a real interesting debate because, like you said, you know, you've seen. LeBron and since LeBron, right? And I've seen Jordan since Jordan, right? And I guess this goes back so much further in time for at least for basketball until basketball's inception in the 50s, right? That obviously it's a continuing conversation, and we're already saying like Luka might be the next GOAT, which he could be, or it could be Wembanyama, right? And I guess that would be a real interesting conversation to be had in 10 years' time. LeBron is done. He's starting to slide out of people's mindsets. Those that are born in, late 2000s probably going, LeBron who? All right. And again, they just don't understand it. They see his stats, just like you can see Michael's stats. Okay. But you just can't feel that, I don't know, that moment in time and that era in time. You can't feel it. And I think that's the part where there's so much debate really about this whole situation.
This is Two Guys with Spare Time. I'm Fowles, this is Nick. You're probably a basketball fan like us, so hopefully you can throw us an assist in giving our video a like and subscribing to our channel.
And if you got thoughts, feelings, or even some suggestions, please put them down in the comment section below. And thank you for using your spare time to watch us in our spare time.